If you're tired of surface-level history and want the truth behind the front lines, subscribe now. Today, we're breaking open a forgotten piece of the past. What you're about to hear isn't a legend polished over time. It's a documented act of raw courage that happened in real airspace against real physics with no margin for error. On one April night in 1944, a single RAF flight engineer made a decision that modern flight manuals still struggle to explain, let alone justify. The night bombing war had already become a slaughterhouse by 1944. By April 1944, RAF Bomber Command had learned how to reach Germany, but surviving the trip was another matter entirely. German radar stations tracked bomber streams almost from the Channel coast. Once identified, night fighters were vectored directly onto the formations. Aircraft, like the Bf-110 and the FW-190, had been modified specifically for night interception, some fitted with upward-firing cannons designed to attack bombers from below, where defensive guns couldn't reach. For Lancaster crews, this meant, well, a slow, heavily loaded aircraft flying straight and level over flak belts, knowing that once engaged, escape options were, honestly, pretty limited. Survival depended on discipline, coordination, and, quite frankly, luck. Fred Mifflin's Lancaster was already damaged before the real danger even began. Flight Officer Fred Mifflin was only 21 years old, but already a seasoned bomber pilot. His Lancaster had taken flak damage on the run-in, but, it remained controllable. The bombs were dropped successfully, the turn for home completed, and the crew began climbing back to cruising altitude. That climb exposed them again to radar-guided night fighters. An FW-190 found them in the moonlight. From above, the German pilot had a perfect silhouette. The first pass crippled the tail and, severely wounded the rear gunner. The second raked the fuselage and wing. Fires erupted near the engine and fuel tank. At this point, standard procedure would have been to abandon the aircraft. But, abandoning a Lancaster with a wounded crewman and an uncontrolled fire often meant, no one made it out. Norman Jackson understood something the manuals didn't cover. Flight engineer Norman Cyril Jackson was already injured when he noticed where the fire was spreading. He understood the structure of the wing, where fuel lines ran, and what would happen if the flames reached them. If the fire wasn't stopped, the wing would fail. The aircraft would break apart before anyone escaped. Jackson proposed something unheard of. He would go outside. This wasn't bravado, it was calculation. He reasoned that if the fire could be extinguished at the source, the aircraft might remain flyable long enough to save the crew. This is a lesson that still applies in high-risk environments today. Sometimes survival hinges on choosing the least fatal option, not the safest-looking one. Crawling onto a wing at 18,000 feet was a controlled gamble, not madness. At roughly 180 miles per hour and 18,000 feet, Mifflin reduced speed as much as possible without stalling. Jackson clipped on his parachute, not to jump, but so the crew could hold him. This wasn't protection. It was a lifeline. Outside the aircraft, Jackson used an escape axe to anchor himself, punching it through the aluminum skin for leverage. This is important. Aircraft aluminum is thin but strong under tension. He used that knowledge instinctively, the same way a firefighter understands how a roof will fail under heat. He moved hand over hand toward the burning section, positioning himself against the airflow. Every move was deliberate. Panic would have torn him away instantly. Using a portable extinguisher, Jackson discharged directly into the wing cavity through a shell hole. The fire went out. For a brief moment, the impossible worked. But, combat doesn't pause for heroics. The FW-190 returned and fired again. Jackson was hit, fuel spilled, and ignition followed. He was blown clear of the wing. Inside the aircraft, the crew felt the sudden weight shift as the parachute lines went taut. They had just seconds to decide. Holding on meant certain death for all. Letting go gave Jackson a chance, however small. This decision-making process, it really does mirror emergency leadership under pressure. When outcomes are equally grim, leaders choose the option that preserves the most life, not the one that feels morally comfortable. Jackson's parachute caught fire, but, the bushes below broke his fall. He survived, though, with catastrophic injuries. Crawling toward a farmhouse, he demonstrated another survival principle that's really often overlooked in combat history. Never stop moving if movement is possible. Static casualties die. Mobile casualties live long enough to be found. Captured and treated in a prisoner-of-war hospital, Jackson recovered fully. He later met the son born the night of the mission. Jackson's actions were not reckless. They were, in fact, rooted in mechanical understanding, situational awareness, and a willingness to sacrifice for others. Modern aircrew emergency training, really emphasizes system isolation, fire suppression, and controlled decision-making under stress. Those principles, they were written in blood long before they ever appeared in any manuals. For historians, this mission, honestly, illustrates how individual initiative can momentarily overcome technological disadvantage. For survivalists, it reinforces a rather harsh truth. Survival isn't about heroism. It's about choosing action when inaction quite simply guarantees death. Norman Cyril Jackson received the Victoria Cross. His response was, simple. What the hell for? If stories like this matter to you, if you want real frontline history without myth or polish, subscribe to Warfare Frontlines and share this episode. These stories truly deserve to be remembered.